Hey everyone, long time no talk, and welcome back to Brainwaves. I'm Michael Yao, and I'm a first-year iBioMed student.
My name is Sarah, and I'm a fifth-year iBioMed student in electrical and biomedical engineering.
And I hope everyone is having a good second semester so far. Everyone had a relaxing reading week. Myself, not so much, because I know I have program selection coming up on my mind, being a first year.
Yeah, I know it's a super stressful time for everybody. With graduating coming up, I feel like we're all making really big decisions. And I know there's a lot of people considering different options, working, research, grad school.
Yeah, I've always wondered about grad school options. I remember coming into this program, I remember hearing something about the accelerated master's program.
Yeah, me too. And I'm sure some of our listeners probably feel the same way. So that's why today we're going to talk to two students who are in the iBioMed Master's Program, the Accelerated Master's Program, and learn a little bit more about it. Without further ado, we'd like to introduce Aiden Delaney, who is in the Accelerated Biomedical Engineering Master's Program. Welcome, Aiden. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm in my penultimate year of iBiomed Mechanical at McMaster. I'm from Kingston, Ontario. I lived in Atlanta for a while. Little fun fact about me. In terms of my extracurriculars and everything like that, I am involved in a couple different research projects, a couple different initiatives for biomedical or mechanical stuff, like the McMaster Design League. I'm a technical lead there. And I also run a little 3D printed art business that I have a lot of fun with. 3D Printeresting, if anyone wants to check it out. And that's about it for who I am, I guess. Still very much in the process of growing into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So could you tell us a little bit about the Accelerated Master's Program and what drew you towards it?
For sure. Well, a couple of years back, I was the instructional assistant intern for 1P10 as one of my co-op terms. And during that time, I kind of got to know a little bit more about academia and all of the different research opportunities that are happening at McMaster. And then when I went to my next co-op opportunity, which was a bit more industry focused, I realized that I wanted to be a little bit more imaginative and cutting edge with what I was doing in my life. And I had never really considered research as a path before that, simply because it hadn't come up in my daily life. But once I kind of realized that I was more of an academic at heart, I started looking into it more, and I saw the Accelerated Master's Program, did a bit of research into it. I've always had a bit of a love for biomechanics specifically, being biomedical mechanical. And so that seemed like an area to look into. I ended up talking with a couple different professors. Shout out to Dr. Wall for really helping set me on a path to success. And I ended up talking to Dr. Quenneville, who I am currently pursuing the master's with, or at least trying to, because the application process is a little sticky.
Yeah, so did you have to make any specific changes to your last few years of undergrad? Were there any major differences in courses or anything like that?
Yes. So in order for it to be an accelerated master's, you have to complete some of your master's courses during your undergraduate career. Usually what they ask of you is that you take either 4FO4 or 4QZ3, I think is the course code, at the graduate level. So that would be 6FO4 or 6QZ3. There's a couple hoops that you have to jump through to get it changed. But what it basically ends up being is that you just have an extra project that's tacked onto the course that you have to do while the rest of the course is running. And I ended up doing 6FO4 at the graduate level, which actually made the course much more enjoyable because it took 20% off the exam and put it on a nice research project that I really thoroughly enjoyed. Also, you have to commit your penultimate summer, as well as the summer after you finish your undergrad, to doing research, going towards the master's, obviously. But honestly, that just kind of saves me the trouble of having to look for a co-op. So I was very happy to do that.
Yeah, and what was the research project that you were doing?
So the research project for 6FO4 was just a bit of an independent study on any kind of biomedical instrument. Dr. Fong helped guide us in the right direction for that. I'll be honest, it was a little strange at points because we were kind of unclear on exactly what he wanted, but by the end, we had gotten to do a nice in-depth look at all of our different instruments. I did one on a blood test for tuberculosis, which is very much outside of my wheelhouse, but I'm also interested in that side of biomedical engineering because it's cool and helping people is interesting. Got to learn a lot about different immunochemical assays, a lot of different automation in that area, which is actually something where mechanical engineering would fit into biomedicine. So a roundabout way of getting back to my own discipline. It was a very rewarding experience, I found.
That's super cool. So can you tell us just a little bit about the application process and how you would kind of get into this program if you were interested?
Absolutely. So I'm actually still going through it despite having started taking courses and initiating research with professors, because all of the application forms are due on June 30th, the year before you would be set to start everything. So I will be finishing my application process probably sometime the beginning of this summer. I think that's just because they want second term grades, probably, as well as to give people a bit of an opportunity to get settled into their research roles. But you have to have a variety of different documentation. You have to, as I said, start taking those master's courses. You have to talk with a supervisor, get them to accept you as an accelerated master's student. They have to make sure that they have funding allocated for everything, et cetera, et cetera. Apply for NSERC if that's something that is stipulated in you being accepted. And then you also have to make sure that you have references, resume, all of the classic academic and co-op style application stuff. There's like average requirements, but I think that is just your penultimate year, and the following year have to be a B+ or above, which I think is fairly standard for a lot of master's programs. That's what it is to be considered. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I remember from what I've looked at.
Awesome. So just wondering, what is the thesis that you're looking at studying, and what's the research behind all of that?
So a lot of that is still coalescing. I'm doing my research with, or hoping to do my research with, Dr. Quenneville. She is primarily in the field of biomechanics, particularly injury and impact biomechanics. What I am hoping to be looking at is a project that she's been running on the biomechanics of hip injuries, where they'll be taking a look at a lot of different clinical case studies and trying to determine exactly what biomechanically caused these hip injuries, because a lot of the ones that they're looking at are atypical, meaning that there is no car accident, there is no slip and fall. It's just those weird cases that you'll sometimes hear about where someone goes to reach up for a box of cereal and their hip completely gives out on the opposite side, the one that there isn't any weight on. So things like that, we'd be taking a look at that. And she has mentioned some interest in looking into machine learning algorithms for trying to interpret that type of data, which I would find really, really neat. Even though I am mechanical biomedical, I like to dabble in things. So I think that would be really, really cool.
No, that sounds super interesting.
So how does the program work with finishing your iBioMed undergrad degree?
So like I mentioned, the summers are when I'm going to be doing most of the research, and I'll have to keep in touch with my prof to make sure that everything's going well during the year. I have to make sure that I uphold my averages, and I may try to see if I can take another master's level course during my undergrad career just to lighten my load in while I'm doing the master's. But it doesn't seem to interfere with things too much, provided I keep passing all of my courses, which, as I'm sure everybody that's listening in iBioMed knows, that is easier said than done.
Right. So it kind of works that you would apply in the end of your fourth year, and then you would know that you're probably going to get in, assuming you finish your fifth year courses and everything. But you would apply at the end of fourth year, or?
Yes, I'll be applying at the end of this year. And I believe it's conditional, considering that there's still a whole another year to go until I start the master's proper.
Mm-hmm. And then once you finish your fifth year, you automatically go into the master's program, and it's just one more year after that, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So I'm just wondering, What kind of like jobs or like careers do you think like this degree will like open up for you, and like what do you hope to do afterwards? Like I know there's like the accelerated like PhD as well that you can do after your master's.
Personally, I don't know if I'd be considering the accelerated PhD, although I said the same thing about the accelerated master's, so never say never. Goals change, everything morphs into the shape that it's meant to be, etc., etc. But what I was thinking for this was that it would allow me to go further in research if I want to, because I am interested in that. But if I decide to take some time in industry, having a master's of applied science or a master's of engineering definitely opens a lot of doors in terms of becoming upper level in terms of management or advancing your career. Even if we're speaking purely monetarily, people with their masters do tend to get paid more and have higher level opportunities. For me, I think it's definitely a bit of both, because I could see myself taking a break, going into industry for a while, and then eventually coming back and trying to get my PhD and become a professor, because there is a big part of me that loves education as well, which hopefully Michael can attest to, being one of my students. But yeah, that's a hard question to answer because there's so many different things that I'd love to do with it. But I think all of the things that I'm considering, it would definitely set me up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So do you have any advice for someone that's probably considering this program and isn't sure if it's right for them?
Think about what you want to do. A lot of people in iBioMed, we are very success-driven people. We are people that are passionate not just about what we're doing, but also about how it reflects on us. Sometimes that's positive because we take ownership over the things that we do, and sometimes that's negative because we get wrapped up in appearances at times. So I think that it would be very important for people to genuinely take a look at what they're doing and think, would I enjoy doing something that's a little bit more prospective and a little bit less known, even if it means maybe for a couple of years I'm not making big co-op dollars. I'm doing more of a research position. I'm taking a step back in that area. And obviously everybody wants to help people, but how do you want to help people as a biomedical engineer or as a HESI student? Do you want to help them in a more technical way where things have been well trodden and you can use what people have done before you? Or would you like to be the kind of person that comes up with new ideas and new knowledge that can be used in the field in the future? And I don't think either one of those is superior, but I would definitely prefer being the second.
Awesome. And do you have anything else to just add on at the end?
Hardest question of the day. I don't know. Keep your grades up. Good talking to both of you.
That's fair.
It's a good motto. All right. Thanks so much for talking with us. I think you provided some really great insight to the program, and good luck with starting it next year. And yeah, thanks for coming up.
Thank you so much.
All right. So without further ado, we have another guest on the podcast today, and it is Conrad Gralla, who is a master's student who also started in the Accelerated Biomedical Engineering Master's Program. So welcome, Conrad. Thanks for coming out today.
Hello, Sarah. Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. So we just like to start with like a little bit. Tell us about yourself.
For sure. So as Sarah has mentioned already, my name is Conrad Gralla. I just recently graduated from the Biomedical Engineering and Health Sciences program, iBioMed. So I was actually part of the first cohort of the iBioMed program. So we were taking all the courses just as the program was being developed and like everything was being established and set up. So it was definitely a trip. I graduated just this past summer, and I graduated from the HESI stream. So my specialty or my focus was the Bachelor of Health Sciences degree, BHSC, and I got a specialization in health, engineering science, and entrepreneurship. So a lot of the work that we did, besides just that core Bachelor of Health Sciences course content, we did a lot of work around entrepreneurship, human-centered design, and innovation. And so we got a lot of opportunities to experience that, play around with coming up with new and innovative ideas in class, in the clinic a little bit. We had opportunities to go to the hospital, which I thought was really fascinating, and so on and so forth. I did a bit of work under Dr. Noseworthy after first year, and I decided after my undergraduate degree, to do a master's. And so I took the path of the accelerated master's program that the iBioMed program offered, and that's kind of what brings me over here. So I'm 7 months into my degree, everything's looking pretty good.
Super cool. So I guess something you were always kind of interested in was doing a master's right away when you started in iBioMed.
So when I first started the iBioMed program, I think my main interest was professional school after undergrad. So I definitely had a big desire and drive to do medical school. I believe medical school was the biggest drive for me. And that was one of the big reasons why I chose the HESI stream, because I definitely had more of an interest in the health sciences when it came to biomedical engineering. A lot of the patient-centered, human-centered design, and just interacting with people first and foremost. But as I kind of went through the program and going through the health sciences or the HESI stream definitely gave me a bit more perspective and a bit more of a realization of alternative options besides just professional school. So I did some research between my summers, and I grew to really love and enjoy medical imaging. I thought it was super fascinating. And so I decided after I didn't get into medical school after my third year when I applied, and I chose not to apply again after I graduated just to give myself a bit of a break. And I decided to kind of take some steps towards seeing what I could do if I were to further explore the whole field of medical imaging.
So tell us a little bit about your, what your thesis you're currently working on, like what research are you currently doing?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously my master's degree is a master's of applied science in the field of biomedical engineering. Specifically though, the focus of my degree is in the field of medical imaging. So my supervisor, Dr. Michael Noseworthy, his specialty is radiology and medical imaging. Primarily, his work revolves around MRI imaging. And so he does a bit of all imaging, MRI, PET, CT, ultrasound, but his big specialty is MRI imaging. And that's also the type of imaging that I find most fascinating, most interesting. So my thesis project revolves around using MRI imaging to look at muscles. So I'm actually part of a bigger study, and we're looking at elderly patients with a condition known as sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is this loss of muscle mass and this reduction in muscle quality in elderly people just as they get older, part of the natural aging process. And so these patients, as they get older, their muscles start to waste away at a faster rate than normal people do. And this affects a decent percentage of people. It's hard to identify any kind of precursors or warning signs for this. And so what the main study is looking at doing is finding ways to either prevent this atrophying and loss of muscle mass, or at least reducing the rate at which these muscles are wasting away in these populations. Specifically, they're looking at people in the Hamilton community. And the way that they're trying to intervene this condition of sarcopenia is by using regular rehabilitation, improved diet, some nutrient supplements, like fairly accessible means, because obviously the big focus of the study is accessibility. So where I come into the picture is I'm using MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, to look at the muscles of these participants before they enroll in the study, and then 4 months after they go through the whole rehabilitation process. So they'll have a prescribed fitness regimen where they have to go to the YMCA a couple times a week. And so after they take part in these fitness programs, they work on their diets, and they take these protein and nutrient supplements. We're hoping to see any sort of changes in their muscle quality. So if I take a second MRI scan of their thighs specifically, 4 months follow-up, and the goal is to see if we can find any quantitative biomarkers or parameters in their muscles that have actually changed or improved as this quantifiable evidence that yes, this intervention is working, and the degree to which the intervention works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super cool. So we were kind of just wondering what a day in your life might look like as a master's student.
For sure. It very highly varies. I think for the first part of your master's, oftentimes it won't be as exciting as you may expect. Many times the first couple months even of a master's degree, you'll spend just performing literature searches, getting up to date in terms of your knowledge in the field that you're trying to specialize in. So oftentimes those days you'll just find yourself spending a couple hours each day just doing online research, talking with your supervisor, reaching out to other experts or professionals in the field, just so that you can kind of get up to speed with how advancements are going in whatever field you're researching. So in my case, MRI imaging. So oftentimes I would spend many hours either reading textbooks, going through papers, and just looking at the different sequences that have been used to look at muscles with MRI imaging, because that's not something that's done as often as, per se, looking at brains with MRI. So with that aside, so that actually took up a couple months of the beginning of my master's. With that aside, nowadays, I kind of have this whole storage of knowledge kind of on the side, a bit of an information bank, if you will. And so oftentimes now I'll spend, I have one day a week, I have a meeting with the research group that I'm a part of. And so that's just where we get to talk about the day-to-day, how things are going in terms of the status of the study, patient recruitment, any issues that may arise, any shipping that has to be done, any sort of communications that way. There was a long period in the degree where we actually just had to work on paperwork. As sucky as it sounds, if you're dealing with patients, you have to go through the whole process to get ethics approval. So it actually took us a couple months to go through all the paperwork so that we can apply to, it's called HIREB, or the Hamilton Integrated Research and Ethics Board. And so they're in charge of making sure that any study that has to do with people takes in the consideration and the safety of the participants you're trying to study, who are volunteering and helping you in your research. So many months went to just paperwork, writing patient consent forms, writing research protocols, all that super fun, not fun at all, work. So nowadays, we have our ethics approval, which is amazing. That went pretty quickly. And so now we're actually starting to ramp up in the research, where we have collected our participants. We have a list of participants in the study, and we're trying to schedule and book these MRI sessions. So most of my mornings, this is kind of actually just recently starting. So the past month has been a fairly slow month for me just because I haven't had too much that I've had to do. So most of my time has just gone towards TAing, because that's also the duty of a master's student or a graduate student. So most of my mornings will look like me reaching out to participants who've already been recruited as part of the study, screening them, making sure that they are comfortable with getting an MRI scan, because some people obviously are not. Some people may be claustrophobic or may have implants. Going through a bit of a screening process and then finding a suitable time for them to actually come to the hospital and get the scan. Besides that, the middle of my days will oftentimes be spent actually doing the scanning itself. So I would be in the hospital, be with the participant. We have our participants lie down for 30 minutes before we actually start the scan, and that's to help let the blood flow rest and settle before performing some of our MRI sequences, because that actually has a quantifiable effect on the results. So that would improve our image quality. And then afternoons will either be writing. So I have to be working on my thesis as I'm going throughout. For example, part of my thesis is just writing down and summarizing the literature review I've spent the past couple months working on. So oftentimes they'll have grad students spend the afternoons or the evenings, or sometimes they'll just choose to take a whole week or chunk of their time to commit straight to just writing. And then sprinkled throughout that whole scheduling of mine, I obviously have the graduate class that I have to take. So that is 1 3-hour lecture a week. And actually, the class I'm taking now, it's called Advanced Brain Imaging, and that's with Dr. Noseworthy. And so that's actually where he's teaching me a lot of the techniques in performing or in the different MRI sequences that are available and used, as well as the data analysis and the steps, like from the software perspective, how you perform all the data analysis. So that's where we learn all the Linux-based tools that I'll have to be using once I collect all the MRI scans of my participants. And then finally, I have the class that I TA. So this semester, I'm TAing the Intro to Medical Imaging course, and that's actually keeping me pretty busy. That's two 1-hour lectures a week that the Dr. Noseworthy wants the TAs to sit in on. And then I lead a lab every other week. And then I also lead all the tutorials for that class. So we usually have 2 tutorials a week for that class. And I lead all of them. So oftentimes those are in the morning, which are not my favorite time, but you kind of go with however the schedule is set for you. And so sometimes in my, not free time, but in my hours during the day, I'll dedicate some time to making sure I know what to be talking about for these tutorials.
Awesome. Seems pretty basic. I never really correlated the TA and the masters. Like I know a few of my TAs right now are master's students, but I never really correlated the two, that you're doing all of this
right.
And then you're TAing on top of all of that.
Oh, definitely. The TAing is pretty important because it's actually it's a decent source of, I'd say it's one of the major sources of income for a TA, for a graduate student. So part of the scholarship or grant money that we get, we only get if we actually TA a certain number of hours per week. So you definitely want to do that. McMaster is actually different in that we also do have a lot of undergraduate TAs at McMaster University versus other universities. So I definitely know, I've been a TA for the first year design course in the iBioMed program for the past 3 years. Was amazing. Love Dr. McDonald. Shout out to Dr. McDonald. But I know McMaster has a lot more undergraduate students that TA, but the one thing is if you're a graduate student at any sort of institution, more often than not, you're guaranteed / forced to TA a course.
Awesome. And what kind of jobs and careers do you think this degree will kind of open up for you? And what do you hope to do afterwards, after you're finished your master's?
So the most obvious or the most straightforward benefit in doing the master's degree would be on the path of medical school or professional programs. So I definitely do want to keep the option of medical school available to me, kind of in the back pocket. So in some medical schools give some benefit to students who have any sort of higher education or higher degrees, whether that be a master's or a PhD. So I definitely have that added benefit going for me. Besides that, I definitely want to look more into industry positions, especially in the field of medical imaging. So a lot of companies, there's GE, Siemens, a lot of companies that have specialized areas of work in the field of medical imaging. So either in terms of constructing imaging parts, so the software perspective, or the health and safety side of things. So those are definitely opportunities that I want to look further into. And one of my hopes through this master's degree is to kind of build more of a network in that specialized field of medical imaging. So especially through Dr. Noseworthy, he's a very well-accomplished and well-connected individual in this field of research. So I definitely know that if I have any interests or any specific niches that I want to explore further, I can reach out to him and he can get me in touch with other specialists or just other individuals of high stature in the industry of medical imaging, preferably MRI imaging, if that is an option that I can pick per se, just because, again, I definitely do find it to be the most interesting modality of imaging. I would also say the other thing that I also want to mention is I always do have the option of further research. So I did tell myself, or I've promised myself that I wouldn't do a PhD. And that's just a matter of I don't think I have the mental bandwidth to survive 5 more years on some sort of specialized project. That's just me. I spent a lot of my undergraduate career doing some sort of research or being a research assistant one way or another. So I definitely, if given the chance, would like to do more industry related work. But I definitely know there are a lot of hospitals that do different fields of research, and they have kind of projects that they open up. And they usually prefer master's students or students with some sort of specialized degree in the field of whatever research they're doing. So if I have experience with analyzing MRI software or analyzing brain imaging, there's also opportunities in the field of like psychology or neurology or neuroscience. So I know I have a couple friends who are applying to positions at there's St. Joseph's Hospital, which is where I'm doing my research right now. There's also John Hopkins. And there are a couple other hospitals in the States that have a whole assortment of positions available.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like the biggest thing is like doing a master's program never closes doors for you. It'll just open more, pretty much. I guess it's the way I see it.
Definitely. No, I hear that a lot. And I think the biggest proponent, I have a lot of friends who would take years off in their undergrad to do co-op, for example. But the biggest difficulty is when you take a break from school, having to come back into that mental mindset of, you have your daily classes and you have your assignments and you're up till midnight doing the assignments. So I definitely told myself if I want to do further education, to do it right after my undergraduate degree and try to get as much of my formal education out of the way at once so that, I do go into industry, I can kind of stay in industry per se.
That's cool. So I guess the thing we were wondering is if you have any advice for students that are maybe considering doing a master's, and maybe if you had any tips for them on maybe getting an advisor or how to make sure that doing master's is for them. It's a pretty broad question, but...
Okay, I hear you. I think first and foremost, in terms of getting an advisor, reach out the sooner the better. That's pretty obvious advice. Try to take advantage of whatever network you've established throughout your undergrad. If you have certain professors that you've become close with over the years, even if they aren't specific to the field that you want to explore further, try to leverage them to the best of your abilities. I know even when I was trying to find a supervisor for my undergraduate thesis, one of my first steps was reaching out to a professor I got pretty close with, who I asked a lot of questions when I was in his class. I reached out to him and I asked if he had some time just to have a Teams call similar to like what we're having now, and just have a conversation about the different professors in his faculty, the type of research going on, and if he had any opinions or thoughts on what kind of work is being right now that's particularly interesting or particularly promising. So definitely leveraging connections are always a big benefit to yourself. And that's relevant to any undergraduate student, honestly, anyone, period, especially undergraduate students, whether it's finding research positions over the summer, finding thesis supervisors, finding master supervisors. I know I started searching for my master supervisor the winter break before fifth year. So the winter break of my fourth year. And that's mostly because you had to have your master supervisor confirmed before the summer after fourth year, because you actually start working on your master's degree or your master's project during that summer period before your fifth year. So you technically, officially in the accelerated masters, you spend about a year and a summer doing your master's project. So that's how they're able to kind of get all your master's work done in officially a year after you graduate, but technically you spend a bit over a year. Oftentimes master's projects do take time to collect data, perform whatever analysis you need. So the more time you have, definitely the better. A big piece of advice I would like to give to people trying to figure out where they'd want to specialize or what kind of projects or research they'd want to do would definitely to begin by considering any sort of area of science or any courses that you found particularly interesting to yourself, or even just professors that you have enjoyed having conversations with and looking further into the work that they do. I definitely say in my case, it all started the summer after first year. And so the summer after first year, I actually got a research assistant position working under Dr. Noseworthy. So at the time, I was very, very desperate for any sort of opportunity. So I didn't care what the project was or what the research was. Any sort of research, I was going to accept it. Because again, this would be only a project for a summer. Worst case, I hate it, and I spent a summer finding out something that I hate. Finding out if you hate something or love something, I think is just as valuable to an individual, and you want to take advantage of any opportunity you can get. So I took that research position, and it was basically just working on a project. So I wasn't helping any grad student with their research. I just had a little independent project I had to do. It was very software based, looking at contrast enhanced brain images and performing a bit of machine learning. It sounds very impressive. It was fairly rudimentary. Dr. Nozuthi was very well aware of my capabilities, so he wasn't trying to give me anything that was unreasonable to do, as most professors will keep in mind if they're taking in undergraduate students. So that forced me to learn a lot about medical imaging, MRI imaging. I found it was really cool, but I kind of thought that was just the end of it. Like, okay, that was a cool experience. Let's go next. Over the years, over the summers, not much changed. Some summers I spent studying for the MCAT. Some summers I spent just catching up on courses or taking courses in advance. And then when it came around time to think about what to do for a master's degree, my first thought was, I do not want to do wet lab. I don't want to do anything that's very core bio. So my first filtering process in terms of thinking of areas of research was just, okay, if I don't know what I want to do, at the very least, what do I know I don't want to do? So I knew I didn't want to do something that was pure bio or like pure biochem, immunology, any like wet lab. I was like, no thanks. What else is available to me? During that thought process, I went through the whole list of professors and faculty in the School of Biomedical Engineering. So at this point, I was pretty convinced that I wanted to stay in that field of biomedical engineering. I just thought it was very interesting and very versatile. There's so many different aspects of biomedical engineering. So I went through the whole faculty list, and I quite literally one by one went through each professor and tried to pull up a couple research papers, look at what their field of research is, what kind of papers are they pushing out, what kind of work are the students in their lab doing? Because realistically, that would be the kind of work that I would end up doing too, right? So going through all that, I would make some notes in terms of like, oh, this kind of paper, this kind of research is really cool. Oh, this research isn't super interesting to me. Or, oh, I don't think this is something that I want to do long term. And so I noticed that I was picking out a lot of the papers that had to do with either MRI imaging, different medical imaging. There was a couple papers in the field of like psychology and neuroscience that I also picked out and thought were particularly cool to explore further. And so my first step then, after I've kind of filtered through, was to reach out to Dr. Noseworthy. I had a sit-down conversation with him and basically was like, hey, I'm trying to find a master supervisor. Can I pick your brain a little bit? And so the whole point of that conversation was just talk to a connection I had, someone in my network, and get a better sense of the research field from a person who is in that field of research. So our conversation went a little bit along the lines of, hey, so what kind of work are the other professors or faculty in medical imaging doing? Like, what are your thoughts about it? Are there areas that you think are like pretty promising? Areas of research that you think are pretty cool? I'm really interested in X, Y, Z. Are other faculty members doing any work in that area? Or do you think that they would be interested in it? The other thing to keep in mind is, say there's a very specific field of science you really want to go further in, but a faculty member or a professor isn't necessarily doing that kind of work. If they're open to doing that kind of work, they can always do some sort of partnership with other profs or other universities even. So you always have that opportunity to pitch your own project if you really want to. Sometimes I think that's really awesome because it feels like your project is a lot more personal to yourself now. So that wasn't necessarily my case, but definitely I had that sit down conversation with Dr. Noseworthy. And near the end of the conversation, I'm like, you know what? Like, this MRI imaging is where I really want to go forward with. I know Dr. Noseworthy. We have a pretty good rapport. I know the kind of work that he does, and I'd love to be a part of his lab. So then I just asked him, kind of straight and simple, just in person. Didn't have to worry about too many like back and forth emails. And in that conversation, he's like, yeah, sure, I'll take you on. So I definitely had a bit of an easier process compared to some of my friends, because I have a couple of friends who are doing their masters now too. And they had a whole email process, or they had to reach out to a couple supervisors before someone were to accept them. So it obviously varies, but that's kind of how the process went for me. And then after that conversation, we went through the whole paperwork, and then we had the masters agreed upon. I think just to add a quick note to that point in terms of the process, because I've had someone ask me this question before. Usually what will happen when you agree, or when a supervisor agrees to be your supervisor, or like agrees to take you on, you'll have a discussion in terms of what project you would be doing. So oftentimes, even before that final agreement that, yes, you'll be a master's student in my lab, the supervisor will mention, hey, so we have X, Y, and Z projects available. Would one of them be of interest to you? Just so you know specifically what kind of work or what your thesis would look like, before you make that final decision or final agreement that, yes, I'd love to work under you or have you as my supervisor. So that conversation kind of happens all at once.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think, I don't know if you have like anything else to add on, any like tips, even if they're just like a first year student hoping to do their master's, a student about to go into their master's, like a second year trying to figure out what they want to do. Just any final thoughts or tips.
Of course. I love to talk. I think the biggest tip, as if you're ever in a program that has a good relationship with upper year students, whether it's alumni like myself or just upper years, like 3rd, 4th, 5th year students, always try to talk to the older students in your program or in your degree or in your stream. Because people always make mistakes throughout their lives, or there's always many lessons and challenges people learn about as they're going through university. And so many older students are more than happy to tell you about all their mistakes or all the frustrations that they've had to go through in their degrees. So there's so much information you can learn about from people who've been, or people whose shoes essentially you are following. So that is the biggest thing. And besides that, take advantage of any opportunity you can get, any research, any project. If you find some sort of opportunity where you got to explore science in some capacity, if you want to be doing science as a career, like if you're someone in STEM, I definitely say, as I mentioned before, learning about, if you don't know necessarily what you do like, at the very least, you can learn what you don't like. And then you can start filtering your options from there. So those are the two big things. And final part is, don't be afraid of over specializing way too early in your life. Be open to the opportunities. Don't feel that you have to pick one option and put all your eggs in that option from the get-go. Because oftentimes, as you learn more about the world around you, or more about science or the field of research, you start to learn that there are a lot more options than you may have thought of at first. When I started at university, I had never considered medical imaging to begin with, or just being a research assistant or working on research projects. I was very dead set on professional school. And had I kind of kept that mindset, I know that I definitely would not have had as much fun or have learned as many experiences that I've had the chance to do. Getting the chance to talk to Dr. Noseworthy, getting the chance to work on this project. I have multiple supervisors from different faculties, because Dr. Noseworthy is one of my supervisors, and I'm co-supervised by Dr. Alexandra, and her specialty is geriatrics, dealing with elderly people, osteoporosis, and sarcopenia. So there's so many different components of biomedical engineering that I'm getting to learn now, just by being as versatile and interdisciplinary as I could be. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for all of your words of wisdom. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Take care, and good luck with the rest of your degree.
All right, that's it for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we really hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something today.
And keep an eye out for our next podcast coming in the next month. Talk to you later.